Peers panel, including the Conservative leader in the Lords, Lord Strathclyde, and with him for the Liberal Democrats, Lord Razzall, and the Labour peer, Lord Surley. Welcome to you all. Now, Lord Strathclyde, which one of those do you think is the clincher? Which is the one that your canvassers are going to go on the doorstep and win those extra voters you need with?
Well, last week David Cameron offered a choice in this election. Everybody thought it was between him and Gordon Brown. Today, what we saw was a philosophical choice between state control, command and control from Labour, compared to that a sort of individual choice, if people wanted, coming from the Conservative Party.
Do you think you're
giving power back to individuals so that they can do the things that the state has failed at.
But, I mean, in all seriousness, do you think you're going to get that mouthful out before the hard-pressed housewife shuts the door in your face?
No, where I do think we will win is by telling people that if they want more control over their lives, they should vote Conservative. That's a really nice, easy thing to say. People instinctively understand it. It goes with the grain of human nature, and it reacts against the centralisation and bureaucracy of the last 13 years.
Lord Razzall, so Conservative offer, if you like, is less top-down. Would you accept that?
Yes, but I think there's a fundamental flaw in where the Tories are at the moment, and having spent the last 6 months listening to them saying we have to do something about the structural deficit, there have to be major cuts in the public sector, we now see a whole variety of promises that are completely uncosted.
Not very expensive. I mean, nothing compared to what you're promising.
Yes, but our commitment tomorrow, when our manifesto is launched, is fully costed. There's no costing at all in the Tory manifesto, and they're mixing their message. They're mixing their message. On the one hand, they're saying, as they have said for the last 6 months, we have to have cuts, we have to do the structural deficit, and then they're dribbling out all these promises. Mix the messages.
What was mixed about his message? Well, I mean, it was quite clear, wasn't it?
Well, yes, smaller state, while at the same time, we've got all these financial promises that are uncosted.
Empowering people.
Also,
smaller state in Conservative terms normally means cuts to public services, and that's really what this is about.
But they've made it clear that they're going to protect frontline services.
Well, yes, they say they're going to protect frontline services. You then have to ask yourself what they mean when they say we're going to hand power back to you. You've got to get the money if you're going to run a school, take over your post office, take over your pub. I understand, heaven knows where else. Where
you've got that one as well, incidentally, your manifesto.
I'm not worried about some of these in principle. I think where I worry is about how you deliver. You know, the real pain for Conservative, supposing they won, which I would be worried about, supposing they won, they're suddenly going to say, OK, you guys get on and run all this. A lot of people say, well, we don't want to run it. We want a decent school. We want this. And actually, at the end of the day, government is about delivery.
People don't want this power. They don't want this responsibility.
Anybody would think that we'd come up with the most revolutionary suggestion out. But in America, they manage to do it. In certain states, in Sweden, they do it. And in fact, in Britain, over the course of the last few years, a number of schools and academies are ceding control from the state. I don't think anyone would
necessarily hold up American public services as
no, but there are the charter schools. There are charter schools in certain parts of the United States that are based in a very similar way to what we're suggesting for the United Kingdom.
And that's not just wrong. It's just that what you're saying is much further than that. The implication is this is going to really change everything. In fact, when you look at it, what will be is small things, which, as you rightly say, are already happening.
But Clive, so anybody listening to you would assume that schools in Britain are beacons to the rest of the world, when in fact the opposite is true. There is real problem in there's a real problem in our schools at the moment. We're looking at alternative ways of making sure that
part of the people, and going back to the grassroots one, would have thought would have been a Liberal Democrat idea. I mean, yes. take schools, for example, yes. But Don Foster had an idea like that a few years ago.
Yes,
it was voted down.
We have always been committed to much greater devolution of power down away from the centre to the grassroots than the other two parties have exhibited when they've been in power. What worries me about this is that it's all window dressing. That really what the Tories want to do is reduce the benefit of the state for the less well-off in our society, because they actually want to reduce it to help the better off.
The argument would be, I was speaking to Michael Gove earlier on, is that this is a more grown-up approach to the electorate. It's not making a wild series of promises of we can spend money here, we can spend money here. It's actually levelling with the electorate. I mean, that's what they're saying, rather than, for example, as Labour was saying yesterday, which is, in the end, trust us, we'll look after you, in a more paternalistic approach.
Levelling with the public really means saying to them, we're going to cut the services, and that's what will happen. I mean, they will.
Well, they are saying they're going to cut the
I'm sure they will
services.
preserve certain services. What needs to be drawn out from the Tory party is a key question in this election: how do you manage the economy at the same time as you protect and enhance public services?
Well, that's a question
and
for all of you, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes, fair enough. And I think we would see that as a major battleground. And what I heard today from the Conservatives, I mean, I quite like the phrase "power to the people." It's got a nice ring to it. It's almost Mao's China
We're all
over again.
together.
But it's not real.
Join
So
us.
it's not real. That's what troubles me. It's part of the window dressing. You know, I drove in here this evening with your car. I passed about 5 or 6 Conservative posters. There's masses of them. It's the Millionaires' Party, and it's the Millionaires' Party which is learning again that it's got to subtly change the message for the electorate so that it can do the cuts that it wants to do.
Exactly.
We can certainly see from the early editions that the Conservative message has got out in quite a lot of areas. Have the Liberal Democrats got a message as strong to offer tomorrow?
Well, we shall see, obviously. I mean, the significant message from the Liberal Democrats will be, and I think you asked Danny Alexander earlier, if he had one word to describe what we're standing for, it's fairness.
42,
he said well, he did, but he also said fairness. And I think if there's one message we would want you to take away and the electorate to take away tomorrow is that we're the party.
Finally, do you think today was the moment where David Cameron at last started taking the party above 40%, the place where you need to be?
I have no idea where the polls are going to go to. I expect between now and the general election day they will be up and down on different stages. The only poll that's going to count is the one on the 6th of May. What David Cameron did today, what David Cameron did today was to put forward a very positive and very optimistic message of hope for the people of Britain, and he wants the people of Britain to be part of this great campaign. And I think that's a great message.
I
think it will lead us to victory on May the 6th.
Anyway, thank you all very much indeed. This is the Bolton Factor. Check out on our website skynews.com and see what your vote could mean inside the House of Commons. Coming up here, tomorrow's papers tonight with Allegra Stratton of The Guardian and the historian Andrew Roberts.
The Sky News Leaders Debate in high definition, April the 22nd at 8 p.m. on Channel 517.